Good afternoon. Welcome once again to our Jazz Vespers. For those that don't know, we do this about every 2 months on even-numbered months. And we actually have the next several scheduled. You'll see in your program the next one scheduled April 15th. We have the premier vocal jazz ensemble from Cuesta College, Cuesta's Voce. So come out after you pay your taxes on April 15th and come out for that. It should be great. And then subsequent to that is 2 consecutive master saxophonists. The first is Ron McCarley on June 10th with his group. And then in August 12th, Dave Becker and his group. The best way to stay up to date on all of this is to see our Facebook page, Jazz Vespers SLO, which is also in your program, or you can go to the church's website and there's a link to the Jazz Vespers site as well. We appreciate your donations to keep this program going. 100% of those donations go specifically to this program. Please join us after the Vespers. We're going to be having some refreshments over in the fellowship hall, some wine and cheese and crackers and strawberries, and a lot of good people to meet with. Get to chat with the band over there. So come and join us for that. I first heard the Ragbone Saints in October at the Jazz Jubilee by the Sea in Pismo Beach, put on by the Basin Street Regulars. Yeah, if you don't know about that festival, check it out. It's a wonderful festival. They run it really well, terrific bands, and the Ragbone Saints are one of those tremendous bands. They play traditional New Orleans style jazz. It's a little different than the kind of jazz that we've had here over the last couple of years, but I knew it would be a perfect fit for this Jazz Vespers. First of all, they're wonderful musicians, and they have such a joyful sound. And it's also timely here in this week of Mardi Gras. The theme for today's Jazz Vespers is joy. It's been said that joy is a state of mind and an orientation of the heart. It is a settled state of contentment, confidence, and hope. Webster's dictionary defines joy as the emotion evoked by well-being, success, or good fortune, to experience great pleasure or delight. For now, though, I think an excellent definition of joy is the feeling that comes over you as you listen to our musical guests today, the Ragbone Saints. Please welcome them.
Thank you very much. It is a joy to be here with you on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. Fat Tuesday just passed, Lent is here, but some of us have a hard time letting go of the Mardi Gras spirit. We're going to try to bring some of that here today. We've got a few songs that are maybe great-grandparents of the kind of jazz you often get here, born down in the South there. First song we're going to play goes way back, maybe before even jazz had a name. And it's a meaningful song to me. My father was a Presbyterian minister, and at his funeral, I played this song for him, and it's called Just a Closer Walk. Ragbone Saints right down the street from y'all. We're all around here. We're going to stay in the gospel mode here. We are in a church after all. And it's a good sing-along if you want to sing along with us.
Please do.
Please do. It's called Do Lord. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Once again, we're so happy to be here, Ragbone Saints. We've been playing around 3 years in this area. Sometimes you'll see us at the Charles Shoes Amphitheater. Sometimes you'll see us down at Obispo playing those wonderful Basin Street regular gigs, which is coming up. Red Barn and Los Osos will have us once in a while, and when they won't have us, we'll just go find a nice little back alley and still have some fun. So thanks so much for having us today. This last little song before our break is a nice old tune you might recognize. St. James.
So it's interesting to me how this program came together today. After hearing the Ragbone Saints last October for the first time, I had the immediate idea that joy and happiness would be a good theme for them. And things have just really fallen into place since then. Recently, when I was at the home of Dale and Kathy Wolf, I noticed a book on their coffee table called The Book of Joy. And so they graciously and eagerly offered to share some thoughts from that book, and we'll hear from them very soon. And then I had run into Dave Bauer a couple of nights ago. He didn't know anything about today's theme, or that he was helping me to write my script for this, but I'll share some of his thoughts in a minute. A few weeks ago, I ran into Kurt Illingworth, who's one of our parish associates. I told him about this idea of this theme of joy and happiness. He shared with me his key to happiness. He says, well, my key to happiness is to have low expectations. I didn't ask him for any biblical references, but he did say I could quote him. Many people make a distinction between happiness and joy. Happiness is generally considered to be a temporary and based on outward circumstances. Joy is a stronger but less common feeling and is brought about more through caring for others, gratitude, thankfulness, and spiritual experiences. The word joy appears 88 times in the Old Testament and 57 times in the New Testament. Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, wrote that joy was the second fruit of the Spirit. The author Adela Rogers St. John has said, joy is a step beyond happiness. Happiness is a sort of atmosphere you can live in, and sometimes, is a sort of atmosphere you can live in sometimes when you're lucky. Joy is a light that fills you with hope and faith and love. Joy warms a person's heart, while happiness merely pleases. Happiness brings pleasure, but joy brings true contentment to one's heart. Winning a lottery brings happiness to a person. Giving birth to a child will bring joy, at least initially. It's been said that the opposite of happiness is unhappiness and misery, while the opposite of joy is fear. Joy is a fruit, a byproduct, an additional blessing, and not the end in itself. The scholar R.J. Blockham said, we find joy not in getting, but in expressing what we are. People do not really live for honors or for pay. Their gladness is not the taking and holding, but in doing, the striving, the building, the living. It is a higher joy to teach than to be taught. The playwright George Bernard Shaw wrote, this is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being thoroughly worn out before you are thrown on the scrap heap, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. He was a tough... One of our great treasures at this church is Dave Bauer, a regular at these Jazz Vespers. I saw Dave a few nights ago. He didn't know anything about the theme of this afternoon, but he did share his philosophy of life. Every morning when I get up, the first thing I do, even before the sun comes up, is to remember that it's essential every day to remember and honor. Remember the joy that was, but focus on what is, and leave what might have been alone. There's nothing there, only pain. Dave continued, my personal motto is search for joy. And I say that several times every day. And I do, in fact, search for joy. Happiness is frankly not very hard to achieve, but it's ephemeral. Joy is not ephemeral. It lasts forever. It's always there. If you look back, it's there. Search for joy. Joseph Campbell, who was famous for saying, follow your bliss, said it in a different way. Find a place inside where there's joy, and the joy will burn out the pain. The author, Marianne Williamson, maybe said it most simply, joy is what happens to us when we allow ourselves to recognize how good things really are. And in closing, I just say, I think we can all recognize how really good the Ragbone Saints are. And I think they'll continue with, appropriately and paradoxically, Happy Feet Blues.
Yeah, this is a Wynton Marsalis tune. And as you may know, Wynton Marsalis, amazing horn player, jazz instructor, human being, classical jazz, he can play it all. And this is a tune that comes out of the blues tradition, but just like so many things, light and dark, pain and joy, hard to separate them sometimes. Happy Feet Blues. all these tunes. We're named the Rag'n'Bone Saints. There used to be a term for the person who would come through maybe with a horse-drawn cart collecting old rags and tin and stuff on by the side of the road, and Rag and Bone Man. And you know, we like that concept of picking up old tunes from the past that other people may have discarded and shining them up a little bit and enjoying them and keeping them alive. And that's these songs. Most of these are back in the 20s, 30s, and this is no exception. This is called Make Me a Pallet on the Floor. Yes, it is the same beautiful song. Make me a child on the floor. And I like hearing the Old Testament still has some value. More joy in the Old Testament than the New Testament. Interesting statistic there. We're going to go back to the Old Testament on this one. Back when all kinds of things could get built and torn down. And we're going to go back to Jericho for this one.
Well, hello everybody. I'm Dale Wolf.
I'm Kathy Wolf.
And our theological qualifications for talking to you this evening are, I don't think we have any. But we're going to talk to you anyway. I mean, I do lead a fun choir, and you can ask me about that if you like to sing, but that's for another time.
He has to do a commercial, you know.
A little commercial. But as Craig did notice when he was snooping around in our house, we did have this book of joy there, and we had both read it. And it's the account of a several-day meeting between the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And they met to discuss the concept of joy and how to find it as an ongoing way of being in the face of life's inevitable suffering. there's been plenty of that in recent days.
The Dalai Lama is the spiritual leader of the Tibetan people and the Tibetan Buddhism. He lives in exile in India. Archbishop Tutu led the process of reconciliation in South Africa. Both men have worked all over the world to promote peace and human rights.
The wonderful thing about these two spiritual leaders and about what they do in this book is that you can learn as much from their interaction with each other and how joyful it is as you can from the principles of living that they came to recommend in the book. They were fun, they were mischievous, they refused to take themselves too seriously, and they laughed and even danced sometimes as if they were at a New Orleans jazz concert.
We'll show you a bit of the way they interacted, paraphrasing their actual words. Okay, Dale, you be Tutu, and I'll be the Dalai Lama.
Okay.
How shall we start?
Well, the obvious beginning when meeting the Dalai Lama would be to say, "Hello, Dalai, what hello?" Okay. Hey, there are people watching, act like a holy person. Now, all right, Tutu didn't actually sing Hello, Dalai. He did receive that little bit of strangulation. But that was the spirit of their meeting, and actually their first gestures were something like this. And they really like each other. So,
Now, people and dear friends, our Archbishop Tutu, we are
Yes.
here to talk about something we all have in common. It doesn't matter what your religion or lack of religion. We all want to find happiness, or better, a broader sense of joy as we go through life.
and to find joy, you have said, don't ask how I can be happy, but how I can spread compassion and love.
Yes, it's in that pursuit that you find the greatest sense of joy. And by the way, my dear friend, I think you have some potential.
Oh, potential. How nice.
Yes, I mean, you could help create a happier humanity because when people look at you, you are always laughing and joyful. You know, it makes people who see you laugh too.
I think it's the beautiful face. But you embody something radiant. You know, people fill stadiums just to see you. Some of the things you say may not be so remarkable, but the spirit behind the words, yes. The spirit, it's the spirit behind the words that always gets them.
Okay, a little aside here. These two special people, the Archbishop and the Dalai Lama, the real ones, radiate joy.
Well, I thought of another person. Just this morning I saw this. And whatever your politics, just picture Mr. Carter pounding a nail in Habitat for Humanity. I think you'll see some of that spirit of joy there too.
And I guess that you know some people that you just feel good being around them. They're fun, accepting, positive, and loving. I always wish I could be more like them. Well, maybe we'll learn how if we tune back into Archbishop.
Archbishop, yes. My dear friend, Your Holiness, many awful things have happened to you and to your people. You've had to leave your homes to live in exile. Yet you showed this serenity, this compassion, and this mischievousness. Why aren't you morose?
Well, when I'm experiencing difficulties, I have a way of thinking about it that is not a special invention of mine. If there is no way to overcome the problem, there's no use spending time worrying about it. If something can be done, we must work to get it done.
When I see violence and suffering, I have the feeling that God is crying. But then I see people trying to help or to make things better. And through his tears, God begins to smile.
And those helping smile too.
Yes, their joy is right there in trying to do some good.
Now, to elaborate on this, in our meetings, those of the Archbishop and I, we agreed on 10 principles that help create and sustain a joyful spirit. We only have time to list them now.
Yes, if you want to know more about these pillars of joy, you'll have to read the book. We're not going to go into all of that right now. And I know you're thankful for that. But we will tell you this. The first 4 are qualities of the mind: perspective, being able to step back and take a broader look; humility, and please never brag about your humility; humor, you see, it comes right next; and acceptance, that old serenity prayer piece of not beating your head against things you cannot change.
The other 4 are qualities of the heart: forgiveness, and we forgive Craig for making us come up here; gratitude, compassion, one of the most important qualities; and generosity, that is, acting on our compassion.
Now, I take a minute and be just Dale now. I saw on TV a story about a psychology professor who was teaching about happiness. And he seemed to have picked up on some of these pillars, because he assigned for homework students to, 1, think about their blessings, the gratitude pillar, and to do a little kindness for someone. Maybe just let someone have that parking space. And the students said it really did work. They felt a sense of joy, just at least for a while, from doing these things.
And so we can all, for example, right now, we can be grateful for today's music.
And we can be compassionate by ending this talking.
I get why we're here. We're filler for the comedy act.
We're joyful.
We're okay with it. So, in the same spirit, some of our notes might not be in the right places, but hopefully you'll sense the spirit behind them. This next one is a great old tune. Bessie Smith sang it, and it's called Mean Blue Spirits.
So I started running because it is my code. And I started running because it is my code. I ran so fast till someone woke me up.
Shivers.
Yeah.
Something.
I'm glad I woke up.
I could have gone south. We're going to go back to New Orleans here. This is one of our favorite bands, Preservation Hall Jazz Band. They're doing a lot of new stuff, and this is one of their new ones called Sugar Plum. Oh yeah. Big one. Well, before our last tune, I want to say thanks again for having us. It's a beautiful space, beautiful audience. Really feel the joy in the house tonight. We're really grateful and joyful, and it's just so much fun for us to come together and play music. So wherever we do it, it's always nice. And I want to introduce our band. On the banjo, with some Bayou Cajun in him, we got the Reverend Gary Arsenal. In the back, our young Turk, Big Will, on the sousaphone, aerospace engineer. Aerospace engineer, he'd fly away if it wasn't for that big piece of metal holding him down. And back on those drums, keeping us on the beat, keeping us true and tight. It's Jungle Paul Trent back there. And you may think, I've seen that clarinet player before, because you have. He's in about 20 different bands. He plays about 5 times a day, and we're lucky to have him, Dapper Dell. We're the Ragtime Saints, and our last song is, oh, Alyssa, oh my goodness, the sweetest part for last. That's always the way it's got to go. Sister Alyssa Bredensteiner, singing beautiful melodies and playing the beautiful guitar. Alyssa Bredensteiner. So we're going to play a tune also from New Orleans, that made famous in 1957 by Fats Domino, another Crescent City native. I'm Walking.
Walking
doing church. Thank you, everybody. Wow. Feeling the joy. Good night, home saints. Have a wonderful Sunday evening. And see you around. As you march out, we'll play you out.
You don't get any joy out of that. Well said. Can I